Hello, everyone, and welcome to basically a nice art talk and dinner with Dan Sprick and Clay Speer, owner of the Grapevine Gallery. And I'm thrilled today to be on with Dan Sprick. He is a Grapevine legend and fabulous oil painter, one of the greatest oil painters we do have the pleasure of seeing his work in this country. We've got a lot to go over today, a very special show for everyone to enjoy. Dan's shared some amazing images with us for a killer slideshow. And we're just going to have a nice art talk about Dan's work and let him do most of the talking after I get done with the introduction. So Dan, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me.
What a lot of people don't know is Dan has been with the Grapevine for several decades, as a matter of fact, and Dan's career is just absolutely taken off to heights, that are really not comparable to many, because he is just so unique. He is his own artist, and he brings his truth to the canvas so many times in his pursuit of beauty, which we will get into more of that. But as we get started, Dan, would you share with the audience kind of what your initial attraction to art and becoming an artist was?
Well, when I was a kid, I was good at drawing. And actually, you like the things that you're good at, and you get better at the things that you like. It's a self-fulfilling, perpetuating cycle, and I always loved drawing. And I think it was a massive advantage that I have, that we're trying to phrase this without boasting, but well, it's just how it was. I drew a lot when I was a young kid. And I think it compares to other types of early windows of learning in life, such as linguistic acquisition or sports. They train baseball players from the time they're toddlers, so I understand. Tiger Woods was playing golf when he was could barely walk, just a bobble-headed toddler. And essentially, I was drawing around that same way. And so it's just become just natural to me in every way. And it's just my life and breath. And there's hardly anything else I want to do. I'd say the downside is that I don't do anything else, and I mean I've deliberately cut out all hobbies, high maintenance houses, wives, you name it. That so my life is very simple, and all I really do is artwork, and pretty satisfied with that. And if I have all the time, and tell you the truth, that's not enough. That's not enough time. I have all the time one man could have, and it's still not enough.
From doing some of these shows, I've talked with other artists. Roz recently shared, something Wilson Hurley said about if your heart's in it, it's going to show. Joe Bullard just said, even at his age, in his 80s, he feels like, he's still learning and getting better. And so, yeah, beautiful book. That's the book we just talked about with Roz. And so, Dan Sprick, Wilson Hurley, Dan Gerhardt, Joe Bullard, all of you have immersed yourself in something you're passionate about, which is why all of your all's work is so strong and so amazing. What are your thoughts about really immersing yourself in something you're passionate about so that you can get better?
Well, it's anyone who excels at a subject has devoted themselves to it exclusively. I mean, sports, literature, whatever it is. Those who excel have given it everything, and a lot, have given up everything else. You make a choice. You can't have it all. you have to pick. And but say again the quote from Joe Bowler that sounded interesting.
He was talking about in our show we did together that so many of these artists, even Phil Stark mentioned it too, that they feel like they're still learning and they're still learning how to paint a good painting. And,
Yeah.
you know, whether it's a painting from 30 years ago, regardless if the collector really still enjoys it and it's one of their favorites, that the artist still is in this pursuit, in this journey of trying to become better all the time. You know, Grant Redden has absolutely made a splash in the art world through the CAs with awards, and now he's the president of the Cowboy Artists Association, just because, you know, Grant would come to a show with us and he'd go to bed with a stack, you know, the books that Dan Blanchard used to have at the Grapevine, and he would just constantly study. And so he was just constantly trying to improve his craft. And so it's kind of a common theme amongst the best artists that they're just always in pursuit of improvement.
Well, that's right. Because you're doing it for some other purpose besides a job. And it's a job. It is a job. And that's okay. But you're doing it, you have, because everybody needs to make money, but you're doing it for something that's just a fulfilling life purpose. And you're doing it just to see, you know, how far you can take it and how much you can grow. And I absolutely feel the same way as that you're a lifelong student, and you I'm still learning new stuff, and I'm still on an upward trajectory, I think. And how long have I been painting? I'm 68 now, and I started when I was about 21 or so, roughly. And so it's getting close to what, it's not quite 50 years almost. And I think I hope I have another 20, 25 years of good years of painting. Let's see, that would put me at 85, right? So, and after that, you can't expect a whole lot, because you're going to decline. I know this, you know, it's going to close out on me. You know, it comes to an end for everyone. So right at this point, that I have no time to lose, no time to waste, and that's why I've cut out any extraneous things like home maintenance. I live in a condominium, and I cut out anything that's high maintenance. I cut out airplanes, which I used to love. I flew airplanes for years, but it's a very time-consuming job to do it right. I owned a bunch of aircraft, and that was great. But it just, I think that you know, my main purpose in life, only purpose now at this point, is doing this work and taking it to the highest level I could possibly take it. I really am still on an upward trajectory, and the progress is, you know, zigzag and sometimes downward, but it's I see growth, and that thrills me, and that's all I want. And I know at some point there's going to be a decline, right? And there is for everyone. And so I'm racing to get as much done as possible, and at the highest level possible. Really not quantity, just the very best pieces I can get done before my abilities decline. It's reality, and so the clock's ticking, and it's ticking louder every day.
Well, before that clock started ticking, could you share, as before we go into our slideshow we're about to start, I've heard artists talk sometimes about when they knew, you know what, I think I can do this. You know, what drew you to oil particularly, and what's took you from a young boy who really always liked to draw, like a baseball player, and you're always preparing to, you know, perfect your craft. Was there a specific painting, or was there a point in your career when you said, I think I can do this?
from the very start. Actually, even before I started, I thought, I think I can do this. I tried and ended up with the biggest belly flop you ever saw. I tried to paint a landscape. Oh, I can do that. And what I did was hideous, awful, and ignorant. And it was, I mean, it's not like it caused me any embarrassment because no one ever saw it, but I was shocked. I thought for sure I could do this, and I couldn't. I couldn't. And it's like 18 years old at the time. And so I thought, holy cow, this is a lot harder than I thought. Yet I knew innately that I could do it. It was the natural thing for me to do, but I hadn't learned it yet, and I hadn't had any kind of training whatsoever, none, and no guidance, nothing. Although I did know how to draw proportionately, and that's important. That's vital, actually, but it's only one part of what you need. It's necessary, but not sufficient, as they say. And so that's what I've been trying to get better and better ever since. And I find that, by the way, that I find that landscape is the hardest to learn.
Really? So with all the different mediums out there, what specifically drew you to oil? Do you just enjoy working with the oil, or?
Well, I do, partly because, well, I've tried watercolor, and there's a couple watercolors in the show. I've done a lot of pastels. Pastel is great, except for one problem. It is unbelievably dusty, and you're breathing that stuff up. I think it's probably it's the worst in terms of health for an artist. And it'd be okay, better if you're outdoors with a little breeze, preferably blowing it away from you instead of toward you. That'd be all right. But it's just too messy. And basically, it's not that much different from oil painting. And oil painting is, it's the same exact pigments, but it's contained in a, viscous, low viscosity liquid that is very controllable once you learn how to control it. And initially, when you're learning, it's really slipping and sliding on an oil slick. And I found it really frustrating to try to learn initially, but then you get used to it and know what to expect. And actually, still to this day, some colors are slipperier than others. And you buy a tube by a different manufacturer of the same color, and you think it handles differently. Mm-hmm. Just the slipperiness of the oil. The pigment's the same, but anyway, let's see, where were we going?
We were just talking about oils, but
oh, why do I like it better? Because it's okay. For the same amount of effort that goes into drawing and watercolor, you just get more for your effort with oil. That's why. I mean, I could spend like weeks on a drawing, but it's nowhere near as gratifying as what I would get out of a painting. Mm-hmm. Doing the same amount of time, same subject, that kind of thing. And I love drawing. Unfortunately, I didn't include any in this show, but I still do charcoal drawing, figures. That's really all I do drawings of, would be figures from a model.
Well, I'm sure the viewers would be more than happy to come back and see a part 2 episode on down the line where we could talk about drawing, and I would certainly enjoy that myself. So we can certainly do that. Well, if everyone will be a little patient with me on the technology end of everything, I'm going to start the screen share and start the, no, that's not the right button. I'll do the screen share here real quick and get our PowerPoint brought up. Also, if everyone will be patient with me too, I'm going to be moving Dan and I around to avoid the images that he shared with us. But The first two pieces are available, and I'll let Dan go into some more details as far as size, pricing, and titles and such. But for now, we'll dive right in. So, end of slideshow. Oh, guess I need to start it again. Still sharing my screen. So again, I apologize for the technical difficulty here. We'll get started here and get it going. Alrighty. Danny, you still there with us?
Yep.
Okay. Well, I think I've actually got us behind the slideshow. This may be even better. So here's the first scene, which on the left is the finished piece, and on the right you said was field study. So I'll let you take it from here.
It's not showing up.
Oh, it's not? Okay. I probably need to do the, sorry. Again, I was wondering, I was thinking, well, goodness gracious, how'd that happen? All right,
I
here
can
we
see
go.
your smiling face, Clay, but that's about it.
Well, I was
Okay,
already
here we
there.
go.
There
All
we
right.
go.
Yeah.
So there we go. All right, again, apologize to everyone. We're trying to get better ourselves, just as a host would, as a painter would. But the piece here on the left is the finished piece, and the one here on the right, Dan had us add as a part of a field study. But Dan, I'll let you take it from here, and we'll learn about this piece.
Well, whenever I do field studies, I'm not thinking about doing a finished piece. It doesn't even cross my mind that this could have a, continued existence. I'm just doing it honestly to be in the moment. I'm moved by the visual impact of the scene I'm in and what I'm looking at, and no concept of the past or the future. I'm just doing this. Well, it turned out later that an exhibition came up on the subject of cemeteries, and it was put together, curated by our mutual friend Tony Hochstetler, and it's currently on exhibit right now at the Brinton Museum in Bighorn, Wyoming, near Sheridan, Wyoming. And alas, I haven't made it up there to see the exhibition yet, but I hope to. So that's what, it took very little to prompt me to do these pieces, because I already had the preliminary studies done. And it was a subject I wanted to develop. And in this particular case, I found that life-size crucifixion to be, and that's what it is. It's maybe bigger than life, and you see it from a mile away, and it's absolutely haunting to me. And I just had to go up there and paint it. It's in New York State. That's where it is, and where I'd been spending a lot of time several years ago. The crucifixion scene on the left, that's there. But everything on the right, the Egyptian obelisk was not there, and there's various tombs and the big vase. None of that existed. I just made all that up. What do you call those big tombs? No, just not catacombs, but anyway, the tree didn't exist either, the bare tree. The leafy material, in the very forefront on the left, was from where the property of my studio is. Clay, could you show the whole image of the finished painting?
Actually, I cropped it down to put these two in here.
Okay, all right, no problem.
So,
but it's larger than this. There's more on the bottom and the top.
Oh, if I got us cropped off again, I'm sorry.
It's all right. It's really okay. So, okay, why did I put that leafy material in the front? Well, there's a number of changes, as you can see. between the preparatory study and the finished painting. In the prep study, I made the sky dark and the crucifixion light, and I reversed it a little bit in the finished painting. I made the sky really light, and the crucified Christ figure actually just a little bit darker than the sky that's behind it. I didn't know I was going to do that. I'm always, I actually never know what's going to happen, which is part of what I enjoy about painting, is that I start out on a journey and I really don't know what to expect. And it's a bit of an adventure, it's a discovery, and that's what makes it part of what keeps me interested. You know, as an artist, really, as anybody who works on anything, you have to actually play little tricks on yourself to keep your morale going. No matter what you're doing, keep your morale boosted and keep your curiosity up. And so if I don't know what's going to happen, it's a mystery, and then I'm more curious. I think I know what's going to happen, but it takes completely unexpected turns. And so that's part of what happened. So I had no idea I was going to reverse things on the, make the background, reverse all those things. And I had no idea I was going to put the leafy material in the front either. And so, it's just, it keeps me excited and interested, and it holds my interest enough to complete the piece. In fact, I work at a pace that may be considered relatively rapid, considering the amount of finished detail in these pieces. And I realized that over the years I've rather intuitively paced it at a speed of working that I know I need to get it accomplished before my enthusiasm fades. But there's another reason why I work pretty expeditiously, again, as compared to how much labor there really is in getting this much detail. I work pretty fast because I can't wait to see how it's going to come out.
Well, and from talking earlier, you talked about, there's the term realism, but you were saying that, really with your work, it's a product of a handmade painting from direct observation, from what you're seeing and capturing the moment. So, and which we've all really enjoyed very much. This second piece, and I'll try to get us out of the way a little bit better.
You can just take us out, really.
I wish I knew how, honestly. Oh, look, I can do that and thumbnail us down here. Hey, excellent. Okie doke, even better. So again, another scene here that you have, that the one on the right is available, and the one on the left is the study. I'll let you talk a little further about that.
Well, let's talk first about the small painting. It's about an 8 by 10 inch painting done on location, and I just love the experience of being on location, and unexpected things happen. And this particular day was hot, and then a rainstorm came. And if you look at the see that retaining wall on the there where your cursor is, that's actually from rainwater. It rained on me and then stopped raining, and I lifted the palette up and shook the water droplets off, and kept working. And I just love things like that. They're unexpected, and I love to actually cope with adverse conditions. And things that adverse within my limit of tolerance, I suppose, because some things are maybe a little too much. But often I'm out there on location putting up with heat or mosquitoes or you know, bad odors. You know, in an urban situation, there can be some, you know, unpleasant things or ambulance sirens like right next to you. And honestly, it sounds a little, but it's part of why I like it. Being on location, it's stuff that just simply wouldn't happen in the studio, and it makes it memorable. And it's actually a big part of why I don't like to sell my little on location studies, because they're a diary of my life. They help me remember my life, and I can look at that and I can remember exactly what was happening that day. The emotions that I felt when I first saw that crucifix. This is also a life-size crucifix. It's in White Plains, New York. And I was driving my mother-in-law to hospital, actually, and I came around the corner and boom, that crucifixion is right in my face, and it's life-size, and it gave me a little shock because it's startling. And I couldn't forget about it, so I had to come back and I just painted it. It wasn't actually a cemetery, it was a parking lot, but I moved these various, for the finished painting, that crucifix was there, that marble crucifix, but I came along, I came back and added these various tombstones from a cemetery, actually, that I had painted in Little Rock, Arkansas, earlier this summer, for what it's worth. And those irises in the foreground came from the property where my studio is.
With this piece, no, I'm sorry, go ahead and finish.
Oh, no, it's nothing more.
With this piece, prior to us starting the recording, we had discussed a few things like when we were talking about composing a piece about, you know, lead into subjects and a general description to feel your audience, and your choice to go how far down that path you're interested in going to create this piece. So with the irises in the foreground and the Arkansas headstones and the New York parking lot with the crucifixion, with this much creativity, it's just absolutely phenomenal to look at. And, you know, just such a beautiful composition. When you're talking about the journey and you got to paint while you still have that enthusiasm, can you kind of walk us through as you're going through, like maybe you started on this portion of the piece and decided to add this, or decided to, you know, bring this into the foreground with the irises?
Yeah, I can. Well, Clay, you are a good listener. That's remarkable. As it was moving along, you know, the stones and the tractor and the car and the irises, none of that was planned. Or you know, the man walking on the left, none of that was planned. It just kind of came along. But most significantly, I think, is the composition, and that's what Wilson Hurley pounded into my brain was the most important thing. And I honestly, all these years later, I couldn't agree more. The composition is the most significant thing. So what I emphasized on this is, no matter how much detail there is in a picture, what counts the most is the overall graphic quality of the, you know, the graphic quality, meaning the big dark shape, which is the world, and the sky behind it. That amber glow in the distance kind of, that was an afterthought, yet it really makes the picture. And that kind of sunset glow, and I darken the foreground with a bit of a, oh gosh, what was it? Ultramarine and dioxazine, kind of a bluish purple that took it way down and made it really a big part of, or a complement, at least, to the sunset. I didn't know that was going to happen, but I think it really made the picture. So in recap, all the detail in the world is not enough to stimulate the emotions that you really get from a graphic, simple, bold composition.
Well, and it's a fantastic composition. And, you know, one thing we haven't even talked about is the car down to the right with the headlights kind of starting to come on. I'm a big fan of glass and silver, and just how an artist can take an oil and turn that into glass or silver, or, you know, any kind of metallics really, in the glass in the car there with the headlights. It's just, it's amazing that you're able to take that light from that glow of the sky with that pop of the headlight, and just bring so much, you know, motion into this piece. With the gentleman walking to the left, I mean, there's a lot of motion, you know, and that's as you quoted Wilson, he always said that's the tricky part of a painting, is capturing the motion.
Yeah, and yet it's, yes, I think it's the most elusive and difficult and most important thing.
Well, it certainly is. It's a stunning piece. So this one is available. So if you're interested,
That's one thing that Walter would say too, was that it, you know, no matter how well you can paint, none of it means anything unless you can generate some emotional response in the viewer.
That's true.
And I think it's true.
Well, this one definitely has.
But you know, that's something that's never mentioned in the world of contemporary art. But let's go. We keep going. I have to watch myself to not go on a rampage about the art world.
Well, that's what we're here for. It's your show. So we've got a couple of close-ups of this piece to go into a little further detail. Should you?
So the tractor wasn't there at all. I got that off of a Google image search. True confession. And if that was I looked for one that it had to be at that elevation, you know, so the bottom of the tires had to be at eye level for that to work out, or close to it. And actually, I remember the photo I worked from for that tractor was sunlit, but it wasn't really too hard to turn it into an overcast, shaded picture subject. You make it entirely integrate with the scene. For what it's worth, like the parts of the tractor they lose edges against the values of the building, and that could be a long story, but that's something I find really important for linking elements together of a painting. We can go into that more as it goes on. Let's keep it moving.
Sure. And then here's I think the last one of this piece, where we have a close-up of the crucifixion for you to discuss.
That's what drew me into the whole thing. And I honestly, as I came around the corner and saw that, I was driving my van, I looked at it and it came as a shock. It's like a real guy being murdered there. And of course, you know, that's your, you know, very quick reaction, but and then you know, seconds later you realize, oh no, it's not a real guy being you know, tortured to his death there. It's really just a marble. But just you know, have you ever come around a corner in an alley and seen a spray painted figure that was life size? Well, it startles you.
Yeah.
And that's really what I mean. And I have that same startled response.
Well, and just as the piece needs to invoke a reaction, the subject matter to draw you in while you have that interest needs to have that reaction too. So here's one last glimpse of the piece as a whole after we've gone into the detail.
So the trees were in New York State, and the leaves were at my studio here in Colorado, and so were the irises and the man.
So we have New York, Arkansas, Colorado, all coming together for a wonderful
thing. And Google images of tractors.
Google images.
Oh, here's something. See the crosswalk on there. Well, I have a real affection for those things. I think it has to do everything to do with the Beatles album Abbey Road. You know, where you see the stripes
Yeah.
on the street, and I, you know, had bought that album when I had a paper route when I was a kid, and so I still like those painted stripes on the street. So it comes from a whole wide variety of sources and inspiration, religiosity.
Well, it's a stunning piece. So if anyone's interested in this piece, just we'll go over some contact information later in the show. As Dan and I were putting the show together, we started talking a little bit more about art. And this was a bit of a grouping of pieces on the next few slides where we'll look at landscaping, or sorry, not landscaping, landscape artwork, as well as some studies of what some water, architecture, and figurative pieces. So we'll start with this little trio and we'll go from there.
Well, these are relatively recent pieces, and it's just an attempt on my part to use light and color to excite me. And if I get excited, generally speaking, other people who view it do too. There's a kind of a rapid consensus that if I really feel something, so do other people. It's a bit consistent. So those are incredibly hard for me. The paintings have only the vaguest resemblance to what was really there. What was there is a departure point, and then I just take it in an entirely different direction beyond recognition. Many times, most times. Other pieces I kind of do stick to what was there. It just really depends. It depends on what impulses course through me, and if I can find ways to make it better and more fulfilling for myself. And if it's more fulfilling for me, it will be for the viewer. Didn't you paraphrase something like that Wilson said? If you're
yeah, and this is me totally stealing it from Wilson, from Roz, that if your heart's in it, it will show. And
right,
one of the things that we talked about before we hit the record button, and as we've been sharing these pieces of art with the audience, is you're talking about your enthusiasm, and you're talking about the journey, and while you're still enthusiastic. And that's why your work is so very, very good, is because as you've been mentioning through the whole show, if you're his quote was, if your heart's in it, it will show. And
yeah, that's concise and succinct.
And I think that's exactly what's going on here. Also, pre-record button, one of the things when I was putting Dan on the spot a little bit was, the whole realism versus, how would you, paraphrase your work. And, you were talking about basically it's a 19th century traditional academic oil painting with technique with 20th century subjects. And I think that's why it's so fun to look at your work.
Well, as part of that conversation, there's very little of the 20th century really has any effect on me artistically. Although there are a few holdouts like Wilson Hurley, Rod Goebel, Harvey Dinnerstein. There's others, but they were, not at the height of, mainstream gallery attention and auctions and well, the art worlds there's numerous art worlds really that sort of barely overlap and are hardly aware of each other, I suppose. But somebody asked me the other day, is realism relevant? And in fact, it's an interview for that I haven't even done yet for this writer, who's a wonderful writer, and just ask my opinion is, do you think realism is relevant in today's art world? And my first response is the question isn't even relevant. But I'd go further is to say basically it's relevant to me, and I don't care about any society or anything else, any any sort of trends and fashions, because those come and go. They come and go so fast. When it's happening, people think this is the thing that's going to, take over the world, and then a few years, maybe 20 years later, it's completely subsided by another art movement. But so none of that really affects me. I just a very simple thing. I feel exactly like someone who's hardly ever looked at art. This is like the least connoisseurship thing that you hear is somebody will say, I don't know much about art, but I know what I like.
Mm-hmm.
And to tell you the truth, I feel exactly the same way. And I do know a lot about art, since I've spent my whole life studying it, and museums all over the world. I've read books about contemporary art and what it's trying to do, and I try to understand. I don't try to understand the art, but what I try to understand is why the fuck people would go for it. But that's what I try to understand, is the human psychology involved.
Well, and it's always good to understand that human psychology, because to tie into what Walter said, the artwork needs to invoke a reaction, and that really helps. So here's another trio, a couple of different water pieces with some setting light. So I'll let you go into some more detail about this grouping.
Well, these two scenes, they're basically fantasy landscapes that I did start with, something that really existed, but at the end, neither of these two paintings remotely resemble what was actually there. The painting on the left, well, both of these, I darken the skies tremendously in order to make the lights, to exaggerate the contrast of the lights and to make them dramatic. It's really a simple principle, or simple concept, is to make things dramatic. But you know what? Most of the time, ordinary life isn't interesting enough. That's why we have to make them dramatic. And after all, if you think about the way filmmakers make a movie, if they just made it about normal day-to-day life, it wouldn't be very interesting. So they have to throw in some dramatic episodes, like, some murders and some hot, scenes and who knows what all, because the normal day-to-day life just isn't interesting enough. And actually, that's how I feel about artwork, because you got to make it more interesting than the world really is, most of the time. And so I've done that. It's a heightened sense. It's romantic. That's really what the definition of romantic, literature, painting, music. What it is. It's heightened. And here's the fine line, though, is if you take it too far with too much light contrast and color contrast, and too many things going on at the same time, it becomes garish. And so it's a taste thing. It comes down to taste. And so
it's kind of as we mentioned before, with what you're saying, that real life's not really as interesting as it needs to be. So that's an artist's duty, be it film or fine art media, to figure out how far do you go down that path to make it more interesting, but not cross the line and be garish, is kind of what you're saying.
Yeah, it is a fine line. And not everyone's going to agree. Each artist and each viewer really is going to have their own sort of intuitive criteria of what's, just what's the proper degree of understatement or exaggeration. In a way, if you think of a number of Sargent's portraits, even though we never saw the model themselves, the models, those pieces, many times you can see there's an element of caricature. And caricature just means exaggerating, things that appeal to you, like if the forehead's long and narrow, make it even longer or narrower, or short and wide, make it shorter and wider. Just whatever it's doing, make it more so. And I think that's a working definition of caricature. And that's what I do with these landscapes, is I'll take what's there and make it more so.
Well, I love how you do it. So a little transition from landscape here, going into some architecture and with some landscape. I'll let you take it away here with these 5 pieces.
Okay. Well, I made my pilgrimage to Athens, Greece, about a couple of years ago, and I was just desperate to see the Parthenon in person myself. And I finally got to do it, and I arrived there, and I was going to paint the Parthenon in my oil paints. All my baggage was lost, and I was going crazy because I wanted to paint the scene so bad. So I went out and bought watercolors, which I had almost no experience with watercolor. And so I had to kind of teach myself really fast how to use watercolors to paint these scenes. And I painted them on location there in Athens. These views, there's actually there's some repetition here. There's 3 scenes, 3 separate scenes, but 2 of which are of the the Acropolis, the Parthenon, and one is a scene from a mountain looking at another part of Athens. I think they're pretty cool pieces. Actually, I like them. They were, they're done, and you know what? They're just part of my diary of life. And I plan to do a lot more of this stuff throughout the rest of my life. And I know it's work that I will have no intention of presenting for exhibition or sale. It's just stuff that I do, a whole lot of work I just do for myself. And even though I'll put it away and not look at it for years and years. But I'll get it out again and remind me of what I was thinking then, and what the currents in the atmosphere were, what were my emotions, responses to experiences, things like that.
Well, it's a great quick trip to Athens to go to, and I appreciate you sharing that with us. That was fantastic. So from Athens to a little bit closer back home, here's 2 different pieces. And again, I'm sorry that looks like the one on the right, I got a little higher than I needed to. We were putting our slideshow together, but here's
the point across.
Yeah. So I'll let you discuss with the audience what you did with the piece on the left and right, and we'll just enjoy.
Well, you know what? These still lifes are as equally as romanticized as the landscapes are. I mean, I've exaggerated to a ridiculous extent, the isolated lights. And I just have to do anything to make it as interesting as possible to me. And on both of these, there was nowhere near the drama in reality as I've painted here, but drama being sort of a shorthand for heightened experience and romanticized light and emphasis on composition. And so that's what I've done. And these were painted in the studio and I'd keep the objects set up for all the weeks that it took to do it. And finally, I'd take the objects apart before I was really done with the painting, because I knew I was reaching the limits of my attention span. And then oftentimes I'll just finish them without the objects. Because what I'm trying to do, it has enough detail. What I'm just doing then is emphasizing light and shadow and things that I think will make it fulfilling. This painting on the right, that at a certain point, the leaves were dark and the cabinets behind them were lighter. And I reversed that, not knowing I was going to, and I did it really gradually in several stages. And that made it, I think, more interesting. And it brought the emphasis down onto that white plastic jug. It's a product container with a threaded neck for a lid and so forth, and plastic cup. But those are just colors and values that I wanted for the painting. Two very similar pictures. Go ahead.
No, I was trying to kind of ask a question as to tie into what you were saying. You talk about, adding some more things to make the still life more romanticized, more interesting, and create some drama. I noticed you've done that with some rose stems before, as my cursor is going down, that sometimes these will or won't be in the vase. And, when you're going through these journeys and you have this enthusiasm, we're here, the plant on the right is in the vase, but, the rose on the left doesn't appear to be in a vase, which makes the piece more interesting. And as a viewer and as a, collector, I really enjoy those things. But as you're putting these pieces together, what makes you make the call, so to speak, of whether to put it in a vase or out of a vase to create a more interesting and romanticized moment?
Well, the reason is that the position of that rose, for the maximum compositional effectiveness that I wanted, the placement has to be exactly where it needs to be. That placement didn't coincide with where I could put a vase. The vase was, a little too far to the left of where I wanted the flower to be. So that's why I put it there. So I attached it with strings and so forth. But does that make sense? That's
yeah. I'm asking because I know a lot of times that when I'm showing art at the Grapevine, people will see these scenes and go, well, why is that over there? And I'm like, well, he wanted it to be over there, and I just needed a better answer.
Well, I do have there's a little, the reason why I want it, want and reason are kind of two different things. Want is more like emotion, and reason is analytical. But nonetheless, there is this correlation between reason and analysis, and I wanted it there because it was really carefully studied, the most optimum position for that rose, as it's talking to the white container on the left. That's this dialogue between those two, and one has to be more prominent than the other, but they both still need to have some emphasis. And so that's what's going on there. And really, a really similar thing is happening on the other painting on the right, which it's kind of the white background silhouetted by that metal compote on the far right of the picture. They're pretty similar compositions in that sense.
Well, they certainly are. And one of the things I love too, if I can play with my cursor for a moment, is it's so easy here in the foreground to look around and go, oh, look, I see a dragonfly. And as you get your eyelids down, then you come back up, these handles turn you in and go, oh yeah, look at the sink. kind of the same thing over here. You get so caught up with the rose and this plate and it being suspended, and you're so curious, but yet all this fun depth and the way you've played with these edges on these shelves with these pieces here on the second shelf, and then, you know, the items up here on this top shelf. It's just fascinating, the way you lead the eye and just keep people really staring at this scene for long, long periods of time.
No, thanks, Clay.
It's really a lot of fun. Oh, sorry, would do it.
I was going to say on both of these, I emphasized atmospheric perspective and exaggerated it quite a lot. It's not that foggy in my studio, but so it's a landscape element to make it more atmospheric, kind of foggy. And it's also known as depth of field, which was really first exemplified to a subtler extent in some works by Vermeer, some of his later works, before there was film. But I've made it blurry and atmospheric back there to emphasize the three-dimensionality. Anyway, that's what I want to say.
Well, I think you said it beautifully, because it very much works. And I was actually glad to come back because I've started seeing other things in this piece as you were talking. Having a good.
Go ahead. What do you have to say?
Oh, I was like, is this like a little leaning chair back here?
It's a stool that
Okay.
it's a plastic stool, black plastic that I use, to climbing to reach high things. That's what it is. It's nothing beautiful. It's not any aesthetically beautiful object. But the reason I did use it for a reason is that it needed more, I needed a darker element there. And that stool was handy, but it could have been a piece of cloth. It could have been a lot of different things. But I used that stool. In reality, see, on this painting on the left, I've made it, kind of bright in the lower left and dimmer at the top. Well, that wasn't happening. In reality, it was all equally lit. But that's something I've adapted from landscape painting, is to make this uneven kind of Claude Lorraine type romantic light.
Well, and that's something else we talked about that we'll probably delve into here and continue with a message throughout the rest of the broadcast. But as with this piece, it's a great place to kind of launch this before we go into the next few slides. You mentioned something, you say that it's not often talked about in art, and that is discovering and capturing the beauty and the moment of truth, and that beauty of that moment, and the beauty in the things that you see, and using composition to bring the most beautiful piece together. And being that the perspective of these legs over here on the right, how they look like they're almost together, and not at the corners, which is a great way to play with these various edges and just keep the eye moving and just keep the brain going, just really staring at the scene. So if you don't mind, let's kind of get your thoughts on just putting the most beautiful combination together.
Well, it's an intuitive thing, but I can sort of reverse engineer it. It's just coalescing values. And really, painting, all it is a bunch of light and dark patches on a surface of a canvas or a board. And but really, in a way, that's like music. It's just a bunch of intervals and frequencies put together, and painting could be thought of that way. And but the thing of it is, those are just simple elements, patches of light and dark. They've been available since 30,000 years ago. Yet, and it's been used and exploited and developed for all these centuries. Yet I still think it's there's unexplored territory in terms of, exquisite harmonies and, transcendent moments that you can, I think there's potential for beauty that's never been discovered. And that's my quest, and that's what I'm trying to do. Just okay to reverse engineer it. Say, like on this painting on the right, see how the bottom of this, it's just a plastic jug with that, yeah, where your cursor is that shadow. Well, in reality, it wasn't anything like that. I've coalesced all those values into one shape, and that's the blue bowl in the book, and various objects there, and then made the vase is the base, the I don't even know what to call it, the plastic jug product container, to be as bright as possible against that, to glow really. And that's something that Wilson Hurley really did consciously or unconsciously. It would develop a glow, and a glow really, you can just think of it as a transition from lighter to darker. It's really all glow is. So it's not that hard to describe, but it has something that really activates the reward centers of the brain.
Well,
like
and I think that's so well said. And I've just been really enjoying listening to you talk about, exquisite harmony and transcendent moments and all the other things that you've brought to the table here today. No pun intended with the subject matter in these pieces, but same thing here. We're going to go into a little bit of portrait work over the next few slides. And here we have a portrait on the left in the snow. And then on the right, it looks like you have a work in progress over here. So I'll just let you take it from there.
Okay. The painting on the left, that was a piece that I started and stopped several times over about a 4-year period. And it's unrecognizable from the original. Originally, it had a dark sky and a light foreground, and I turned all that around. And that tree branch came from, an imaginary and a twisty actual tree in New York State, where I was spending some time. And I strove for a really dramatic composition, that really transcends ordinary moments. The painting on the right, okay, this painting on the left it's a large painting. It was done over at least a 4-year period. And the painting on the right was done in one day. It's a small piece, and that's a wonderful relative of mine in Hot Springs, Arkansas, and is in his house there, and he posed for me. I didn't have to pose the whole time because I spent a lot of the time working on the landscape and the architectural parts, and he didn't have to sit that whole time, but he sat for quite a while, and I thought that was a good piece.
It's fantastic. I love the way the light is coming off the water in the background. And, I've talked to a couple other artists about this too, with the piece on the left is, being from Oklahoma, our snow is fluffy and white and usually gone in about 3 hours, but it rarely stays cold enough here for the snow to refreeze to get those, different color values you've captured there with the blues and the pinks. And so, finally, after we had one really bad storm here in Oklahoma and it froze for 3 or 4 days, I finally understood the color of snow as the artist. But we had to take that opportunity to finally get a real comprehension of it. But I love how you've captured all those colors in snow, because just like clouds really aren't white, snow really isn't white. It's really a wonderful reflective medium to really make paintings pop.
Well, at the risk of repetition here, that was another thing that Wilson pointed out so clearly, was that snow, it's to get it right, it's not going to be all eye squinty white. It's only going to be the brightest on the surfaces that are perpendicular to the light source, and other surfaces are going to be a little darker. Even though the stuff, it really is in the sun, it's blindingly bright, there's still variation in it, and you can't make it all just pure white. And the way he explained it, I got it in an instant, and it was so clear to me, and kind of changed my life.
Well, it's I'm glad you guys had such a wonderful relationship, because it's such a joy to look at both your all's work.
Oh, thanks. And I mostly got to know him through the Grapevine.
Well, I'm glad to hear
Pretty
that.
cool. Pretty cool.
You guys are both Grapevine legends, so
Right.
it's great to, and I think that's one of the best things about the Grapevine is, we're not a traditional gallery. We're more of a, smaller gallery that tries to bring the artists and the collectors together to talk art and get to know each other. And, even when the artists show together, they have the opportunity to bounce ideas off each other. And it's the whole cliche of iron sharpens iron.
All right. That's a good one.
Well, here's a group of 3 portraits with not as much focus on the landscape and more of a focus on the portraiture work. And you've done so many wonderful portraits. What draws you into, is it the same as some of these landscapes you've said that you really don't know where it's going? You're just going to kind of follow your enthusiasm through the piece. Is it the same with a portrait?
It is in terms of composing it, but say if it's a portrait of someone that I know and care about and want to build a likeness, then I try to stay a little bit more with the facts. I'll maybe exaggerate some things, and I'll also exaggerate things not consciously, but then in retrospect, I'll realize that it was exaggerated in a way that, whether intentionally or not, it is what I needed to do to make the thing as interesting as possible. The piece on the left I did from photos. Well, I did a study of her, and then I also took a lot of photos, and I did that over a long period of time. And the center piece, I did that entirely from life. It was about a 3-hour pose. It was part of my figure drawing group, drawing and painting. And the piece on the right, I also did from photo on my iPhone. It's a woman that I know that I want to do a portrait of. So, there is a little bit of difference. Now, if it's a hired model and it's not a commission piece, which I almost never do commission pieces, but if it's a hired model, I'm not that concerned with fidelity. I just want to make a good picture, and there may be exaggerations, and I may have some errors, like the distance from the nose to the lips, or things like that are a little off, but they're still plausible. With people that I know real well, or family members, I try to get it as accurate as possible. Although where I'll have my, compositional excitement has to do with the larger shapes outside, say, the face, the background and various parts of it that, the overall arrangement of large forms within the limits of the rectangle.
Well, that's an excellent explanation about, knowing someone versus a hired model and what keeps things plausible in a portrait. Getting down to portrait work here, we have a a couple of nudes here that are a part of the portfolio you wanted to share. This is often a subject too, where some people are or aren't comfortable with it. How did you become comfortable with this subject matter to be able to paint it so well?
Actually, the first, okay, here I am, 18 years old or so. My first year of college, and I walk into an art class. It's a figure drawing group, and it's a nude model. And I'd never seen in my life to that point. Okay, made up for lost time, but since then, but at the time, I think I must have turned white as a ghost and I couldn't even function. I honestly, I practically lost consciousness. But and so I didn't do a very good job that first day I ever saw a nude figure. But then you really do get used to it and you become objective, and eventually it's just about as about like doing a still life. You don't get all worked up. You're working objectively. Like maybe a physician would examine a patient. You have, a lot of work to do that day, and you just, of course, you enjoy the beauty of what you're seeing, and yet you're also very absorbed in the task of accomplishing your job. And so I think that's the question that you're asked.
Yeah, and that's what I wanted to share with the audience, is that this is something that, a lot like the first pieces, that something that maybe set you back when you were younger, but then you've become more comfortable and objective with the subject, and you're able to, paint it as an item of beauty, and kind of what your quest is in your journey about, getting the truth and the facts down on paper and capturing the beauty of the moment.
Well, that's what it's about. I enjoy doing the painting of a wide variety of body types. Who, what we get models of all the shapes and sizes and ethnicities, and that's really beautiful. And actually, there's another model I wouldn't mind sending you a picture of if we can get this on here. Maybe at the end of the show, we'll cycle through the rest of it.
We'll probably have to save that one for the next time. But
Okay.
yeah, when we do the next show, which I
Okay.
think we've got plenty of material to do to talk about drawing, and maybe go a little more in depth on certain subjects and certain compositions. And speaking of models, was we were putting this together, I made a little dad joke about getting to the bare bones of
Pretty good dad joke.
Yeah, pretty good dad joke. So here's where you've worked the skeletal image into a landscape, and also you've played with the interior of the, with the windows of, it's kind of still life, it's kind of portrait, it's kind of landscape, it's a little bit of everything. And I'll let you talk a little bit more about this piece.
Well, this particular piece, it evolved over time. Initially, the interior was light and the exterior was bright. And I completely reversed that, in terms of the sky. And then I brightened the, the buildings out there and the junk cars. And I emphasized those reflections of the bones. What was going on? There was, those tree branches didn't exist, and I put, and then I made the cast shadows on the distant building that didn't exist.
One of my favorite things too is the reflection here in the glass. That's a big part that I enjoy in this piece.
It's a fun thing. And then I made those tree shadows echo those, the tibula and what's the tibula and
Fibula.
Fibula, yeah. Thanks. The buildings I made that kind of a twilight scene. What else was I going to say about this? That corner window doesn't exist in my studio. I just have north lights, and really to have both a north and an east light would be would really be a nuisance for painting. You know, you just want north light. But what I do about that, if I want the appearance of a corner window, is I put a mirror, place a large mirror there at a 45-degree angle. And so the whole months that I'm working on this, that mirror is in place, and it gives it the illusion of a corner window. Yet the light doesn't change, or I mean, it changes with direct. It just exactly like the initial light. See, on this, the initial light, the real light was only on the left, and that whole scene on the right was, you know, in the mirror, and but whatever it does on, you know, in reality, the mirror does the exact same thing. So as long as they change together, it's manageable when you're painting. But say if one was an electric light and the other was a natural light, they wouldn't change together. They would, because the electric light remains constant, and the natural light changes all day long.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just a fun thing to do, and you know, it's really easy. Oh, if you just place a mirror at a 45-degree angle, then it looks like it's making a corner.
Well, yeah, it would do that. Well, that's really insightful.
Mm-hmm. So that.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right. These are little. Keep going, Clay.
Okay.
These are painted on location, and I love getting people in these paintings. Are just, if you could enlarge that one on the left, it's they're just little gobs of paint. But I've done so much figure painting that I've gotten where I can do those little things like Canaletto did, for example. It's just a couple of gobs that really do look like a figure. I was painting on location, and as people were splashing around in the river there, and it was so much fun that they were having, and it was kind of infectious to me, and I had a lot of fun too. And the painting in the center, it was an overcast day, and that's really the easiest when you're painting on location, overcast, because the light remains, you know, fairly constant throughout the day. And the two scenes on the left were actually both along Cherry Creek in Denver, and which courses through the city with walkways and bridges, and, you know, all sorts of access. And then the painting on the right was painted at my hometown, Glenwood Springs, and I was standing on the Roaring Fork River Bridge, looking across at this restaurant, and you know, with a deck, and there's figures out there, and umbrellas, and gas heaters, and in the distance is the various mountains of western Colorado. A painting on location is just, it's about the hardest damn thing there is to me, and yet it's some of the most rewarding too. It really is a diary of my life.
Well, it's the challenge of capturing the motion in the moment, and that's probably why the reward is worth the difficulties involved. But you've done a beautiful job. You know, one thing Leon and I talked about in his show was, you know, with his woodblock prints, he was talking about, he didn't try to get into the detail of actually painting a bird. He used, you know, like you said, the gobs of paint with the people in the river here on the left to suggest those figures, as you
Suggest is the right word.
yeah. It's probably with the same with this restaurant over here on the right, is that you suggested those figures and let the viewer really have that emotional response you mentioned earlier in the show about having that fun in that river that day.
Yep.
A little bit more architecture, a bird's eye view, so to speak, of this this piece.
Well, that's the view from my balcony. I live in a high rise. I'm on the 16th floor, and so looking down, I love looking down, and in a sense, it's like if you're looking down at a still life on a table, or if you're looking down at houses from a high balcony. It's the, linear perspective is the same. And, the reward is pretty similar. So that's right here at my home.
Well, it's a fun view.
Yeah, thanks. So.
Oh, sorry. Let me go back.
Yeah, that's keep going.
Okay.
The scene on the left was painted there in Western Colorado, and honestly, it wasn't very interesting, but that bridge was enough to carry the picture. I think that it would be interesting, like if I put some light poles on the bridge itself that didn't exist, or something, maybe some figures. It needs just a little something, but it's for psychological reasons. But compositionally, it's fairly complete, I think. And the piece on the right was painted on the spot there, and there's all these figures. It's a location called Cheeseman Park in Denver, and that's a Greek revival kind of not a temple, but what would you? I forget what you would call that. Stone temple kind of thing, and it's a really beautiful thing that that's there for the public in Denver. The plants in the foreground, I moved around and composed to it because the plant wasn't exactly there. Where I was at, I was under the only shade tree anywhere near there, and I just had to be because it was a burning hot day, and so it wasn't the most optimum view, but the shade was just necessary for me that day. So I moved plants around and reshaped them to fit the composition, not necessarily for what was there.
Well, and that's what makes it so nice, is that you do have that foreground to help create the depth between here and the Greek columns there. And I really enjoyed your perspective of what would make the piece on the left be like we were talking about in the still life, about making life more interesting. So, well, let me see if I can fix our screen here and get back to where we were. I think I've stopped with that. So
we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have, and I tell you, I've really been looking forward to us getting together with this Zoom call, so to speak, our art talk, because I've always been a huge fan of your work, and it's just been so nice to let you just very candidly and openly share, your journey through painting and what you look for when you create a piece. I think, like we talked about, you and Wilson talking earlier, and kind of iron sharpening iron. It's nice for these other artists who are fans of your work as well to have you just so openly share some of the things that you look at when you compose a piece.
Well, thanks a lot. Thanks. It's, in reflection, it reminds me of how meaningful and formative those years were in my artistic development. And so I'll always be glad for that.
I know that you've had some books that you published in the past. Are there any other books that we know of in the future you're thinking about?
Well, there's bound to be some in the future, but they really haven't been books, just exhibition catalogs. It's really all I've had. There's been a public television documentary that was done on me a few years ago. I don't know if you saw that. If you haven't, I'd send you a copy of it.
Oh, I'd love to see a copy of it. I did see it online, but I didn't see the show. I saw the
online. It's on YouTube too.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is. So that kind of gives a sense of my travel through time and through my artistic development over all these years. And all I can say is stay tuned, because it's not over. There's more to come. I think it's still on the upward trajectory.
Well, we're glad to hear that, because we certainly are all looking forward to the future and all your new pieces that you're going to create. Right. But other than books, any shows you'd like to mention to the audience?
Well, I do. My next show coming up will be at the Gerald Peters Gallery in New York City. That will be in February, and then there will be another exhibition in Denver at the Madden Museum, probably later in the year or next year. You know, during I didn't want to do any shows during the you know, the quarantine period, because I you know, I like in-person shows when people can, when it's actually accessible to viewers in person. And so I haven't had a show. This will be my first show in about 6 years, I think. And but meanwhile, I have been working furiously, so I've gotten well prepared for it. So that's what's coming up, and that's what's coming up, and that'll be worth doing.
Well, Dan, thank you so much for joining us today and all the information you shared with us. And obviously, with some of the stuff we talked about, I think there's going to be a part 2 coming soon. So again, you'll need to stay tuned for us as well. For any questions or inquiries about acquiring some of Dan's work, quick plug for the gallery. You can find us by looking on the internet, grapevinegalleryokc.com, or our telephone number, 405-528-3739, or you can email me directly at clay.grapevine@gmail.com. So once again, Dan, thank you so much for your time this evening.
Well, thanks, Clay. And I'd have to say you're a fantastic host and have a remarkable memory for what you've heard. And it shows that you're a great listener and thinker. So it's really great to have a discussion with you. It's actually unusual to find somebody who's such a good listener.
Well, thank you so much. Kind of like with your art, when I do these shows, you know, I'm in my enthusiasm phase when I'm listening to the artist. You know, I've been doing this for a long time with the artist, but I still kind of have that rock star, you know, glamorization for you all. I know that you all
That's funny.
are just normal people.
Artists, typically artists don't see themselves as any sort of star. We live almost entirely in solitude and work, because it's it's just work you do by yourself. And but so it's nice if it seems that way. But we're pretty improbable stars.
Well, you're a star in the world of the grapevine, so we're
thank you so much. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and
All right.
thank you all for joining us.
Okay.